I'm Scott Koegler. I'm here with Chris Eng of Vericode.
Yep.
We're going to talk about maybe some of the differences in using a SaaS-based application versus on-premises, and what kind of issues you may want to talk about and just be aware of if you're making a change, or maybe just be aware of in general when using any kind of software.
Sure. So really the move to cloud doesn't really change the security equation as much as you might think it does. If you're using already an on-premise solution, you're already using software from some ISV or some outsourced provider,
right,
and it's of unknown origin, right? Unless you're actually doing security testing against that software to understand what risks it may be introducing into your environment, you're kind of using it blind. Now, if you transition using that on-premise software, instead of using a SaaS-based solution, something in the cloud, you have all the same worries, all the same concerns. You're still using something of unknown pedigree, and you want to make sure that the SaaS provider is doing some level of security testing so that you feel comfortable about using it. All your data is going to be stored over there, transactional information, sensitive personal information. So even though the data is living in a different place, you still have the same application security risks that you need to keep in mind.
Right. So you need to have either the same kind of a security outlook that you would have had in a kind of a mid-size or larger organization where you've got a staff on board that's tasked with being sure that you are secure, or in many cases where you've got a smaller organization, you really don't have that kind of a team in place.
Right. I mean, if you're developing something internally, then you can start to address some of these things with SDLC and doing developer education and checking at various points in the life cycle. If you're using something that you didn't develop yourselves, then you're either relying on the vendor to do that security, and you should really insist that they give you information about what they are doing, what are they doing with the SDLC, what types of testing have they subjected their application to, whether it is static testing or dynamic testing, if it's a web application, are they doing scanning, are they doing penetration tests, and SaaS providers have to be willing to share that type of information if they want you to feel comfortable using those services. So there's definitely been an increased move to hold software vendors, whether it's on-premise software or SaaS providers, more accountable for the security of their applications. And we're seeing that a lot in our business, where one of our service offerings is that, say I'm an enterprise, I'm thinking about buying a piece of software or integrating a piece of software into something I'm building, right, building into procurement language or contract negotiations, the requirement to perform security testing. And that's something that people are going to have to start thinking about more and more as they outsource more or as they use SaaS providers, right, increasingly.
And I think the equation really has changed, as you said, even in-house hosted applications. I can remember you set up a firewall and you turn it on, and number one, you rely on the fact that the firewall is keeping you secure. But most of the folks that I have known through the years have never really paid much of a thought about the actual applications in-house. And one of the things, and this has more to do with the EDI portion of the business, where the traditional applications have been translators that are installed inside the firewall. And by design, the data comes in and goes out into that translator. So at that point, it's an EDI file. It's encrypted. Pretty much your sources of those, but somebody could hack the encryption. I mean, those things it's PGP generally, but you could masquerade as one of the vendors and get inside, and then who knows? You've got this box inside, and it talks to your ERP.
Right.
Who knows what?
Yeah, I mean, any vulnerabilities in that parser or that thing that is interpreting the incoming EDI files, there could be vulnerabilities in that. Right. Depending on what language it's written in, let's say it's written in a native language like C++, it could have file format vulnerabilities where there's a format defined, and if you twiddle a few bits here and there, or you put in you say that a field is longer than it really is, that can cause overflows in the back end or different types of memory corruption errors. So yeah, it depends on what other controls you have around that.
Anyhow.
Right.
So
yeah, and your customers are depending on you to keep your data to keep their data safe.
Right.
And
right.
they may or may not care where it physically is. They just want to know that it's protected.
Right.
So moving the infrastructure, using the SaaS-based provider doesn't kind of absolve you of that. It just kind of transfers the responsibility and transfers the risk a little bit. But ultimately, liability-wise, you're still on the hook. Right,
right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the tools to do that are the kinds of things that you do, the vulnerability assessments and...
Sure, yeah. So our core service at Vericode is static binary analysis, and that allows you, whether it's a vendor or your own internal code, it allows you to do static analysis of your software without providing source code. And this is actually a patented technology that only Vericode has. And it allows us to kind of model the software in isolation and look for patterns in the code that are representative of security flaws, and then report those back. We also do dynamic analysis, so kind of web scanning of a live application. We also do manual penetration testing, and all the data from those assessments feeds back into our service platform. So you can think of it as kind of an application risk management platform,
right,
where you can keep track of all the apps in your portfolio, see how they're doing over time, and what the different risks are, and how different teams are doing, how different software providers are doing, and how different vendors are doing that you're working with. And so we have a program where you can actually say, I want to get this particular vendor's product assessed. We reach out to them, put them through the process, and then they get a full detailed report of what's wrong.
In the presentation you did last night, I noticed something that I've been watching over the period of time. Number one, you are a SaaS provider. I mean,
That's correct.
Your application is a SaaS application, and the data aggregation that you demonstrated you've got, when you said billions of lines of code analysis and thousands or hundreds of applications, and the ability to aggregate that and come up with crosscuts and all kinds of analytical tools is something that it may not be particular to SaaS-based applications, but it sure is a lot easier because you got all the data in one box.
Exactly. Yeah, if you think about on-premise solutions for software security, it's a product, it's shipped in a box. It goes on-site on maybe a couple dozen developer workstations, and they run the tool periodically. But a lot of times there's no mechanism to look at that at a higher level, see how the organization is doing. You have kind of islands of data sitting in different developers. And that's only within one organization.
Right,
now,
in one set of applications.
Right. How do you compare yourself to your peers, how people in similar verticals or that are programming in the same languages as you, how do you compare yourself against them to see how you stack up? You have to, and that's one of the advantages of SaaS really, is that you have that centralized data warehouse that you can start to ask interesting questions about, make observations, and draw some conclusions about how people are doing. How's open source doing versus commercial? How's outsourced doing? How is the financial industry doing relative to the government industry? I mean, you can start to do a lot of things with anonymized data that you couldn't do in an on-premise solution.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Chris.
Yeah.
Good
nice
talking with you.
To you.
All right.